Here with us now, MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor, MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde, retired commanding general for the U.S. Army in Europe, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, and retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Peter Zwack. Hey, Jake, so we see the softer tone coming from Maduro, almost conciliatory, like an olive branch. Does the administration seem any more interested in negotiations? What's the end goal here?
Yeah, I mean, look, to really what Trump's ultimate goal is here, he's all but hinted essentially at regime change in Venezuela. And, we've reported over this the past few days. He has said multiple times now that the Venezuelan leader's days are numbered. In terms of what the U.S. is actually interested in negotiating, that's really the question, I think, to focus on now here, because Trump has said before that he's open to talking with Maduro. The New York Times reported that they spoke in November. But as you said at the top, the president has referred to Nicolas Maduro as a narco-terrorist, as a dictator. And so those are tough lines to have said about an individual that you're going to go into some type of beneficial negotiating meeting with. I just spoke with a couple of White House officials asking how legitimate the opportunity may be that we see a Trump-Maduro sit-down or a phone call that actually is beneficial. I just want to read a couple of those responses I got from White House officials just now. One said to me that the president would meet with literally anyone. He said, I don't think it should surprise you at this point that would be the case. Another White House official said to me that Trump met with Kim Jong-un, the pariah of the world. If the president thinks it would be beneficial, then he'll meet with Maduro as well. And so obviously the president has said these really incendiary things about Maduro, but also we have seen the president meet with a lot of these world leaders that potentially we would not expect. We are seeing that softer tone from Maduro. We're now going to see how the president chooses to respond to that in the coming days.
Jake Traylor, thank you. And David, whether we negotiate or not here, what could a response from Venezuela look like if we continue to see the escalation? Venezuela has detained American citizens in the past. How could the dynamic change in the coming weeks?
You could see more detentions of American civilians. There was more than a dozen Americans that were released in a deal negotiated right at the beginning of the second Trump administration. And I think one of the most interesting developments is Russia calling for the U.S. to let that tanker go that it's been pursuing for so long. This was after the crew of the tanker, which didn't have a flag, that's why it was being followed by the U.S., it didn't have a legal flag, painted a Russian flag on the side of that vessel. It is cutting off oil sales by Venezuela that threatens Maduro most. I think this video was an effort by him to look confident and calm and sort of flexible to his own population. And I think Trump would speak to him. Look, Vladimir Putin is a dictator. Vladimir Putin kills his opponents, and President Trump talks to him. So you could see some sort of meeting here. But the key thing for Trump seems to be getting Maduro out and getting, U.S. access to Venezuelan oil.
I do want to circle back to the Bella One in just a moment, to that oil tanker that's being pursued by the U.S. Coast Guard. But General Hodges, how do you interpret that messaging that we just heard from Maduro? Is this a sign that the pressure campaign from the Trump administration may be working, that Maduro feels like he's running out of options?
Well, certainly, Ariel, President Maduro is feeling pressure, but you used the key word at the beginning. What is the end goal? I don't think any of us really understand exactly what President Trump's strategic objective is. And if you don't have a clearly defined strategic objective that you can explain to the Congress, that you can explain to the American people and to your allies, it's very difficult to come up with effective policy. And so, I mean, we're all guessing that this is about regime change or oil or drugs, but you don't have, if I'm a commander, I want to know exactly what is the specific strategic objective you want me to accomplish.
So to that end, General Hodges, if Trump does end up driving Maduro out of office, what next? Is it like the old saying, you break it, you buy it, like we saw in Iraq when there's regime change? Is this the burden going to fall on the United States in a post-Maduro Venezuela?
Absolutely. And we do not have a good record of effective regime change that has a positive outcome on the other side, because we either have a poor understanding of what's going on inside the country, or we pick the wrong guy, or whatever it is. And I'm concerned that, and Pete Zwack can articulate this much better than me, but I'm concerned that the administration has not thought through all the way to who will in fact be there after Maduro. What do we want it to look like? Because you can be sure that this will generate a lot more refugees out of Venezuela and the surrounding area as well.
General Zwack, what do you make of the U.S. actions against Venezuela so far, and where do you see the situation heading?
Well, well, certainly they're consequential. However, yes, it's been overt and aggressive, but also covert with the drone strike on the Venezuelan coast. And then the president announced it or mentioned it in a briefing. So I think pressure. I'm not sure what we really want as an end state. Do we want them out? Yes. We want the drugs to stop? Yes. Do we want to have business in some way where you take them to the edge and then open up to a negotiation over oil and other valuable resources. So I think it's still open-ended. Congress needs to be brought more into this. And as such, our people, the American people, need to get really from the president a more definitive statement, especially if possibly our service members, our flyers, our sailors, and God forbid, ground troops are involved in any way. So there's a long way to go with this. Maduro senses that he's watched what's gone on, I'm sure, in the Middle East and in Ukraine, and maybe is working or will be working toward a deal. Plus, his neighbors are quite edgy about this, the whole region.
So, General, I want to circle back to what David mentioned about that, the Bella One. We're seeing that sanctioned oil tanker being pursued by the U.S. Coast Guard. It claimed Russian protection, and there are now reports that Russia is asking the U.S. to essentially leave the ship alone. The U.S. has, gone after the shadow fleet, as it's called, that ferries sanctioned oil between different nations that we would consider more adversarial. Could we see other nations retaliate against the U.S. if these seizures continue?
Well, this is important because we've heard overtly Russia and China make public statements. I'll offer this regarding China. And I know that, there's concern that the Russians will intervene or put the ship under their protection in some way. Russia is involved in a very, very, very complicated kabuki dance of negotiations with the United States over Ukraine. And I think that Putin, while he'll push the envelope, he does not want to really alienate Trump now and do something really overt in our hemisphere regarding this, which seems to be a major project for the president. So the Russians, I think, are going to be wary about doing anything robustly military regarding the ship and other assets in the region, because if something blows up inadvertently, in some new age Cuban Missile Crisis, God forbid, it would not go well for Russia.
So, David, I want to turn now to Iran. Overnight, the president threatening the regime over those deadly protests that we're seeing unfold. He said that the U.S. is, quote, locked and loaded and ready to go. This follows the threats, of course, that we saw against Iran's ballistic missile program and the nuclear program from the president. Is the U.S. inching closer to more military action against the Iranian regime?
In short, I hope not. Experts have long said that the single worst thing that the United States can do when popular protests erupt in Iran is to demand and say things like President Trump just said. By making these statements, it makes these protests appear to be American engineered. It discredits the brave Iranians who are in the streets right now protesting for democracy in their country. The economic sanctions that the U.S. has had on Iran for so long has finally caused so much economic pain to average Iranians that they are taking to the streets. So, this is, I'll just say, in my opinion, one of, if not the worst things the president can say. If there were protests in the United States against, politicians, would Americans want a foreign power to say we're locked and loaded and ready to bomb the U.S.? So I covered Afghanistan and very briefly Iraq, but this kind of talk of a foreign intervention doesn't help. You want to encourage this kind of popular uprising. You want the Iranian people to decide their future. You don't want to bluster. You don't want bluster about American weaponry being used. That just, I think, does not help.
I hear your point. I think a lot of people would say that the Iranian regime will paint this as a U.S. effort, no matter what is said or not said. Obama actually expressed some regret for not coming down a little harder in support of the protests when he was in office in Iran. But General Hodges, the Pentagon used those bunker-busting bombs to attack Iran's nuclear facilities over the summer. What action could you see the U.S. taking next?
Well, Ariel, you have put your finger on the big problem here, the gaping hole in the national security strategy of this administration, as if we can confine our interests and our assets to one hemisphere and that the other areas, that's somebody else's problem. Everything we've talked about here in the last 15 minutes is interconnected, whether we're talking about Russia and Chinese interests in Venezuela, America's interests in Iran, and obviously Russian interests. So if I'm the chairman of the Joint Chiefs or somebody like that, I want to know what is the strategic outcome we're trying to accomplish, not just a list of targets. This is not the best use of American military power. Certainly, I think all of us would love to see an end to this regime in Iran, but launching missiles there is not the answer.